Discipline is the only thing between you and your dream life. Not luck, not talent, not the right opportunity finally showing up at the right time. Discipline. The specific, unglamorous willingness to keep doing what needs to be done, especially on the days it doesn't feel like it matters. Most people don't want to hear this because it removes every comfortable excuse they've been quietly relying on for years. If discipline is really the deciding factor, then the gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't about circumstances outside your control. It's about a decision available to you today. The same decision it's been available to for as long as you've had this dream in the first place. That's an uncomfortable thought, and it should be, because comfort is exactly what's been standing between you and this dream life the entire time. Not a lack of resources, not bad timing. Comfort chosen quietly, repeatedly, disguised as reasonable living. Let's define discipline clearly, because it's often misunderstood as something harsh, extreme, or joyless. Discipline isn't punishment. It's simply the willingness to act in alignment with your stated goals, even when your immediate feelings are pulling you in a different direction. That's the entire definition. Not more complicated than that, and not requiring any special personality trait most people don't already possess in some form. Everyone has experienced discipline at some point, even briefly. The willingness to finish something difficult because you'd already committed to it. The choice to show up somewhere uncomfortable because you knew it mattered. Discipline isn't a rare gift some people were born with and others weren't. It's a muscle, and like every muscle, it strengthens through consistent use and weakens through consistent neglect. Here's what makes discipline so specifically powerful in relation to your dream life. Dreams, by definition, require sustained effort over time. Nobody achieves anything meaningful through a single burst of motivation, no matter how intense that burst happens to be. Motivation is unreliable, unpredictable, and almost always temporary. It shows up when conditions are favorable and disappears the moment conditions become difficult, which is precisely when it's needed most. Discipline doesn't depend on those favorable conditions. That's the entire point of it. It functions specifically during the moments motivation has already abandoned you, which is exactly why it's the deciding factor between people who eventually build the life they imagined, and people who spend years circling the same unrealized ambition, waiting for motivation to return and carry them the rest of the way. Think honestly about your own history with this specific dream, whatever it happens to be. How many times has motivation shown up briefly, convincingly, only to disappear again within days or weeks? That pattern isn't a personal failure unique to you. It's simply what motivation does, reliably, for almost everyone who has ever relied on it exclusively. The people who eventually succeed aren't the ones who found a way to sustain motivation indefinitely. They're the ones who stop needing it to continue. Let's talk about what specifically closes the gap between where you currently are and the dream life you're imagining, because vague encouragement to be more disciplined rarely produces actual change without a clearer understanding of the mechanism involved. Discipline works primarily through consistency, not intensity. This distinction matters enormously because most people who fail to build discipline aren't failing due to lack of effort in any given moment. They're failing because their effort is inconsistent, dramatic in bursts, and then absent for extended periods afterward. A person who works toward their dream with moderate, sustainable effort every single day will consistently outperform a person who works with maximum intensity for a week and then disappears for a month. Even though the second person's individual efforts might look more impressive in isolation. This is because dreams, almost universally, are built through compounding, and compounding requires an unbroken chain of contribution, not an impressive but interrupted one. This means the discipline required to reach your dream life isn't primarily about pushing yourself harder in any specific moment. It's about showing up reliably in whatever capacity is genuinely sustainable, day after day, without the dramatic interruptions that typically characterize motivation-dependent effort. Sustainable consistency, even at a modest daily level, almost always outperforms unsustainable intensity in the long run. Let's address something honestly, because it deserves direct acknowledgement rather than avoidance. Discipline is genuinely difficult, especially in the beginning, before it's had time to become a stable habit rather than a constant internal negotiation. This difficulty is real, not imagined, and pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone actually build the discipline required to sustain long-term progress toward a meaningful goal. What makes discipline difficult specifically is the immediate discomfort involved in choosing long-term benefit over short-term comfort repeatedly, across countless individual moments that each feel small and insignificant in isolation. The workout that requires effort when resting would feel considerably easier. The focused work session that requires concentration when distraction would feel considerably more pleasant. Each individual choice feels minor. The accumulated pattern of those choices, repeated consistently over months and years, becomes the entire difference between a dream that stays a dream and one that eventually becomes reality. Here's something worth understanding about why this specific discomfort exists in the first place. Your mind, like every human mind, is wired to prioritize immediate comfort over long-term benefit, a pattern inherited from an evolutionary environment where immediate survival mattered considerably more than long-term planning. This wiring isn't a personal flaw. It's simply the default setting every human brain operates under, unless deliberately trained to prioritize differently through consistent practice. This means the discomfort you feel when choosing discipline over comfort isn't evidence that something is wrong with you, or that you're simply not cut out for the specific dream you're pursuing. It's evidence that you're a normal human being, operating against a natural bias that has to be actively overridden through repeated practice, rather than something that disappears automatically once you've decided your goal matters enough. Let's discuss the specific relationship between discipline and identity, because this is ultimately where lasting change gets built, far more reliably than through any specific technique or system alone. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, even in a small, seemingly insignificant moment, you're reinforcing a specific identity, someone who follows through on what they've committed to. Every time you choose comfort instead, you're reinforcing a different identity, someone whose commitments don't consistently translate into action. This matters because identity, once established, begins operating largely automatically, without requiring the same level of conscious effort each new decision would otherwise demand. Someone who has spent months consistently choosing discipline over comfort in a specific area eventually finds that discipline in that specific area starts to feel less like a constant battle and more like simply who they are, requiring considerably less internal negotiation than it did during the initial period of building it. This is genuinely good news, because it means the difficulty of discipline isn't a permanent condition you'll be fighting indefinitely for the rest of your life. It's specifically concentrated in the early period of building a new pattern, before that pattern has had sufficient time to become identity rather than effort. The discomfort you're currently experiencing, if you're currently in that early building phase, is temporary in a specific, meaningful sense, even though it doesn't necessarily feel temporary while you're inside it. Let's talk about what specifically undermines discipline most reliably, because understanding the common failure points makes it considerably easier to guard against them directly. The most common undermining factor isn't a single dramatic failure. It's the accumulated effect of treating individual lapses as evidence of complete failure, rather than as isolated, survivable moments within a much longer pattern that remains fully intact, as long as the lapse doesn't compound into abandonment. A single missed day of discipline toward your dream life doesn't meaningfully damage your overall trajectory. What damages it is the specific interpretation that frequently follows a missed day. The belief that the missed day has somehow proven the entire effort is already failing, which then produces exactly the kind of complete abandonment that a single missed day on its own would never have caused directly. This is why the specific standard worth adopting isn't perfect, unbroken discipline, which is unrealistic for almost anyone across an extended time frame. The more useful standard is simply returning promptly after any lapse, treating a missed day as an isolated event, rather than as the beginning of a larger pattern of abandonment. This single distinction between occasional lapses and complete abandonment determines far more about eventual success than the specific number of days spent in perfect, unbroken discipline. Let's discuss the specific structural changes that make discipline considerably easier to sustain over time. Because relying purely on internal willpower without any supporting structure makes discipline unnecessarily difficult for almost everyone. The most effective structural change is reducing the number of daily decisions required to maintain your discipline. Because every decision, even a small one, consumes a limited resource that becomes increasingly depleted throughout the day. Someone who has to decide each morning whether they'll work toward their dream life that day is expending decision-making energy that a person who has already predetermined that decision through a fixed schedule or a non-negotiable standard doesn't have to expend repeatedly. This is why successful, sustained discipline typically involves removing the daily decision entirely, replacing it with a predetermined structure that simply gets executed rather than debated fresh each morning. Consider how this applies practically. Instead of deciding each day whether you feel like working toward your dream, decide once in advance during a calm, clear-headed moment exactly when that work will happen, and then simply execute that predetermined schedule regardless of how you happen to feel on any specific day. This removes an enormous amount of the friction that typically undermines discipline, because the difficult decision has already been made in advance during a moment when it was considerably easier to make clearly. Let's talk about the relationship between discipline and your specific dream life, because it's worth being concrete about what discipline actually produces over time, rather than treating it as an abstract virtue disconnected from tangible outcomes. Whatever your dream life specifically involves, financial freedom, a particular career, a specific level of health, a meaningful creative body of work, discipline is the mechanism through which the individual steps required to reach that outcome actually get taken consistently across the extended time frame almost every meaningful dream genuinely requires. This means discipline isn't separate from your dream life. It's the literal process through which that dream life gets constructed piece by piece, day by day, through actions that individually feel too small to matter, but collectively determine the entire outcome. There is no version of your dream life that arrives without this process, regardless of how much you might currently be hoping some alternative path exists that bypasses the requirement for sustained, consistent effort over time. Here's something worth sitting with honestly. If discipline is genuinely the deciding factor and everything discussed so far suggests it consistently is, then the primary obstacle between you and your dream life was never really external circumstances. It was always the specific, repeated choice between comfort and commitment, made in thousands of small moments that individually felt insignificant but collectively determined everything. This realization can feel discouraging initially, because it removes the comfortable possibility that external circumstances were primarily responsible for the gap between your current life and your dream life. But it should actually feel considerably more empowering than discouraging, because it means the deciding factor has been within your control the entire time, rather than depending on circumstances you have limited ability to influence directly. Let's close with something direct and practical, because understanding this relationship intellectually changes very little without a corresponding shift in daily behavior. Identify the single most important discipline currently missing from your pursuit of your dream life. The specific, consistent action that, if maintained reliably, would most directly move you toward that outcome over time. Commit to that specific action today, not as an intense, dramatic burst of effort, but as a sustainable, modest commitment you can genuinely maintain across an extended time frame, without burning out within the first few weeks. Build the structure that removes the daily decision, predetermining exactly when and how this action will happen, so that maintaining it depends as little as possible on how you happen to feel on any given day. When you inevitably miss a day, and you likely will at some point, return immediately the following day, without allowing that single lapse to become evidence of complete failure. That specific pattern, consistent action combined with prompt recovery after inevitable lapses, is the entire mechanism through which discipline actually closes the gap between where you currently stand and the dream life you've been imagining. Discipline is the only thing between you and your dream life. Not because everything else doesn't matter at all, but because discipline is the specific mechanism through which everything else, opportunity, skill, resources, eventually gets converted into the sustained action required to actually build what you've been imagining. Choose it today in whatever small, unglamorous form is genuinely available to you, and choose it again tomorrow and again the day after that, until the choosing itself becomes simply who you are. Let's talk about a specific misunderstanding that quietly sabotages many people's relationship with discipline before they've even had a chance to build it properly. Many people imagine discipline as something you either have or don't have, a fixed trait similar to height or eye color, rather than a skill that gets built specifically through practice, the same way any other skill develops through repeated, deliberate use over time. This misunderstanding matters enormously because it means people who struggle with discipline early on frequently conclude they simply aren't the disciplined type, rather than recognizing that everyone struggles with discipline early on, before sufficient practice has had time to make it considerably more automatic. The people who eventually appear naturally disciplined were rarely born that way. They simply accumulated enough consistent practice that discipline stopped requiring the same visible effort it once did. Understanding discipline as a trainable skill rather than a fixed trait changes the entire relationship you have with early struggle. Instead of interpreting difficulty as evidence you're not cut out for this, you can interpret it as exactly what building any new skill looks like in its early stages: uncomfortable, inconsistent, and requiring more conscious effort than it will eventually require once sufficient practice has accumulated. Let's discuss the specific role environment plays in either supporting or undermining discipline, because willpower alone, operating against a poorly designed environment, produces considerably worse results than moderate willpower operating within a well-designed one. Your environment includes the physical space you work in, the people you spend the most time around, and the systems or absence of systems that either make discipline easier or harder to maintain consistently. Consider how this plays out practically. Someone attempting to build a consistent writing habit while working in a space filled with distractions, surrounded by people who don't understand or respect the commitment, without any specific time block reserved for the work, is fighting an uphill battle that has very little to do with their personal level of discipline. The same person working in a dedicated space during a specific reserved time block, with at least some understanding from the people around them, will find discipline considerably easier to sustain, not because their willpower increased, but because the environment stopped working against them. This means part of building lasting discipline toward your dream life involves honestly examining your current environment and identifying the specific elements working against your consistency. This isn't about achieving some perfect, distraction-free environment, which is unrealistic for almost everyone. It's about making deliberate, achievable adjustments that reduce the amount of willpower required to maintain your commitment, freeing that limited resource for the moments that genuinely require it most. Let's talk about the specific relationship between discipline and rest, because this distinction is frequently misunderstood in ways that undermine long-term sustainability. Discipline doesn't mean constant, relentless effort without any pause for recovery. Genuine discipline includes the deliberate practice of rest when rest is actually appropriate, rather than treating rest and discipline as opposites that can never coexist within the same sustainable approach. The distinction worth making clearly is between deliberate scheduled rest and reactive unplanned avoidance disguised as rest. Deliberate rest is chosen in advance as part of a sustainable long-term structure, understanding that recovery is necessary for continued effort rather than optional indulgence. Reactive avoidance happens in the moment, triggered by discomfort, and disguises itself using the language of rest while actually functioning as exactly the kind of comfort-seeking retreat that discipline is specifically designed to interrupt. Learning to distinguish honestly between these two categories matters considerably, because treating all rest as a violation of discipline tends to produce burnout and eventual abandonment, while treating all avoidance as legitimate rest tends to produce exactly the inconsistency this entire discussion has been warning against. The skill worth building is honest self-assessment in the moment, asking directly whether this specific instance of stepping back is genuine, necessary recovery, or simply comfort-seeking disguised more acceptably. Let's address the specific timeline most people should realistically expect when building discipline toward a genuinely meaningful dream life, because unrealistic timeline expectations frequently produce premature abandonment, even when the underlying approach was actually working correctly. Discipline, particularly in its early stages, typically feels considerably more difficult than it will eventually feel once sufficient practice has accumulated. And this difficult early period often lasts longer than people initially expect or feel prepared for. Research and consistent observation across many different domains suggests that new patterns typically require somewhere between several weeks and several months of consistent practice before they begin feeling noticeably more automatic than they did initially. This timeline varies considerably depending on the specific behavior involved and the individual circumstances surrounding it, but the general pattern holds fairly consistently. Expect the early period to feel harder than you'd like, for longer than you'd prefer, before it starts becoming noticeably easier. This matters because many people abandon new disciplines specifically during this difficult early period, interpreting the ongoing difficulty as evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with their approach or their capability, rather than recognizing it as the normal, expected experience of building any genuinely new pattern. Understanding this timeline in advance helps considerably, because it allows you to expect and tolerate this difficult period as a normal phase, rather than mistaking it for a signal to abandon the effort entirely. Let's discuss what specifically distinguishes people who successfully build lasting discipline toward their dream life from people who repeatedly attempt to and fail, because this distinction deserves direct, honest examination rather than vague encouragement. The primary difference isn't raw willpower, natural talent, or fundamentally different starting circumstances. It's specifically the willingness to continue during the difficult early period, when the pattern still feels effortful and unnatural, rather than interpreting that normal difficulty as definitive evidence of failure. This means the actual skill being built, underneath the specific dream life being pursued, is tolerance for sustained discomfort without immediate reward. This skill, once genuinely developed, transfers considerably beyond whatever specific dream initially motivated its development, becoming a durable capability that makes future pursuits in entirely different domains have been without this underlying capacity already established. This is perhaps the most valuable, though least discussed, benefit of building genuine discipline toward any meaningful goal. The specific outcome matters considerably, but the underlying capability being built through the process, tolerance for sustained effort without immediate reward, matters arguably even more, because it becomes available for every future pursuit, long after the specific dream that originally motivated its development has either been achieved or evolved into something different. Let's close with a final, direct challenge. Because everything discussed throughout this exploration remains theoretical until it's actually applied to your specific circumstances, starting today, rather than at some future point once conditions feel more favorable. Identify right now the single discipline that would most directly close the gap between your current life and your dream life. The specific, consistent action that matters more than any other single thing you could commit to today. Build the smallest sustainable version of that commitment, something genuinely achievable even during difficult weeks, rather than an ambitious version likely to produce burnout within the first month. Predetermine exactly when and how this commitment will be executed, removing the daily decision entirely so that maintaining it depends as little as possible on your fluctuating daily motivation. Then begin today, understanding clearly that the early period will likely feel more difficult than you'd prefer for longer than feels comfortable, before it eventually becomes the automatic identity level pattern that actually closes the gap you've been trying to close for considerably longer than necessary. Discipline is the only thing between you and your dream life. Everything else, every circumstance, every obstacle, every excuse you've been quietly relying on, ultimately depends on this single underlying variable, present or absent, consistent or sporadic, chosen or avoided, in the accumulated thousands of small moments that determine far more reliably than any single dramatic decision ever could, whether that dream life eventually becomes real or remains permanently, quietly just out of reach.